This one page in the book shows a picture of a group of Dias standing in front of soldiers armed with guns. The picture also plays a song that I believe is about when Dias discovered that they were descendants of the gods. They made this realization, however, while they were working for the mayor of a city. They called the city the Corporation. My guess is that they called them that because the Dias had made a deal with the hierarchies. In exchange for shelter, food, and art materials, the Dias would service all the city's artistic needs, such as shows, architecture, and clothing. It personally reminded me of some of the opinions of commercial art exhibited by giant businesses to promote an idea, service, or product.
I think it's the popular thing to hate that type of stuff. It's the whole yin and yang, no good without evil, no God without Satan type of thing.
Commercial art is it's fine. I mean, I personally, don't have an interest in it because I'm just motivated differently.
It's never really been something that I've had any interest in.
I've got mixed feelings when it comes to commercial art.
I guess I'm indifferent. I mean, there can be some really cool commercial art out there. Some very slick, I'll be honest, the iPod stuff with the silhouettes, I think that's really cool looking art. It's fun. And it's generally, I'm generally not towards that contemporary, clean look.
The only thing that separates commercial art from me from quote-unquote fine art is that when something is commercial, the whole general premise is to make money, of course.
I think that there are some people out there who are really, really skilled at it and have a lot of talent in terms of understanding what their demographic wants and making that happen. But I think it's also very, very tricky because I think commercial art, more than a lot of other fields, again, you have that responsibility to the public. And do you want to make something that is authentic and speaks to the greater natures of people, and treat people as though they're smart and they're sensitive creatures, or do you want to sell something?
A lot of it can be done tastefully. Some of it's boring or annoying. But, and I also think that that's how a lot of artists pay the bills.
So I think in some ways it's like this necessary kind of evil that's just lingered with us, In a lot of ways it's still art. If it's done, if it's executed well, I think it still holds on to its integrity as art.
I think the two need to be combined. We're in a capitalist system, people need to make money, you need to live. I'm definitely somebody who does not believe in starving artists.
But in a way, I feel like that is all that is promoted. People are no longer seeing the relevance of creating art for the sake of creating art. They're seeing it as a means to an end.
Back in the WPA, there was workers. It was a certain program they had years ago, like in the 60s, I believe, going back to like the 60s, 70s. They had these almost like these programs that they had where artists were recruited to paint murals around the city and do art projects, which was cool for artists. I think something like that is definitely beneficial. A lot of businesses, I think, should embrace that ideology a little bit more because, again, it would keep beautification in neighborhoods. You had a business, for example, and the walls are blank outside. They don't want people writing on their walls, writing, graffiti on the walls or whatever. So they recruit some artists to come paint murals on like a two-sided building, one on that side, one on that side. And maybe every 6 months to a year, they pay the artist to come back and paint something new on it. If every business embraced that, you keep some artists paid and fed, and you keep some beautiful artwork on the walls all throughout your city.
The Dias were very dependent on the corporation for living, but having someone dictate and control their work was an expensive price to pay.
I would not want someone looking over my shoulder, but I do think that there's a difference with working alongside someone.
Yeah, I always work with people. When you're working on a project, they say, oh, I don't like this scene, I don't like this photo, I don't like this video, I don't like that shot. And, it hurts at the end of the day, because it's your baby, You love it.
They want their colors to be neon green, tan and blue. They want that. And you know in your head, that is going to look awful. But that's what your client wants.
I've had current and former students ask me, like, well, if you're doing a commission, how far do you allow the client's vision to override your own?
It goes too far when businesses start, just taking complete control over your work. You see this in the film world all the time, where a director will hop on a project and the producer will get final cut. He'll throw music on some scenes, make scenes shorter, and just cut out the whole motif or theme or look that you were initially shooting for.
You just need to have good communication. You both need to be vocal and clear up front as much as possible on what your visions are.
The client needs to, if they don't consider themselves an artist in any way, they need to first understand more about our world, and I think the artists need to understand if they're separating themselves from business client protocol, they need to understand more of that.
Your job is to fix toilets. And I'm sure you're the best toilet fixer in the entire county. I would never take that away from you. But I'm the artist here, and I'm telling you that those colors are not gonna look good. I'm telling you that slogan that you want is not gonna look good. Cut the crap as your slogan for a plumber. Yeah, it's funny, but it's not gonna get you business. It's gonna make you sound like an amateur. I wouldn't call you.
I've had people who have been nice as pie to me, who have wanted to make big sweeping changes, and because they're easy to work with and they explain to me this is why, that's usually, I can deal with that.
We can have a creative conversation about a way to market or push something, a product, but it definitely needs to be free-flowing.
If they're rude, or if they don't really appreciate what it takes to make this project work, I'm a lot less inclined to be receptive to changes.
Build a relationship between artist and collector, like hang out with each other. If somebody is interested in your work, they like what you do, and they're willing to support you.
Working on a film myself, as a filmmaker, the producer has been very encouraging and very open with me following my creative drive and not locking me down. And granted, he could be one in a million because he really respects artists and understands. As a writer, he's also a writer, and so he really understands, the support that the artist really needs.
I think that it's just a matter of making sure that everybody's on the same page.
The Diaz didn't have the best luck in improving their relationship with the corporation. They kept pushing the Diaz to put out their work faster. The Diaz wanted more time that wasn't willing to be given.
Both sides have very strong agendas. An artist wants to be as creative and create a project that's truly amazing, but the business side, he wants to make that money.
Just to finish a piece, it's gonna take a lot of energy out of you if you're really into it. So by the time you're done, you may need to take a break, a week, 2 weeks off, kind of get your head, mind, and spirit back in place before you start the next piece. Commercial work don't allow you that time.
It's very rare that people do their best work under that kind of pressure. But every once in a while, you will meet someone that it's just like, well, damn, good for you. I've never been that way. I've always needed plenty of time to kind of speculate and get my best ideas, get my ducks in a row.
Some people, they need the time to meditate, but some people are extremely lazy like me, and a deadline is essential.
I think the best way to work is to have a deadline. Otherwise, the likelihood of things getting done in the time that you need them to get done just realistically doesn't happen.
Procrastination can kill a lot of momentum in an artist.
Then you really feel the pressure and you start to get in your head, I think, and you aren't as focused on what you're supposed to be creating, what you're supposed to be working on.
Because they're about product and getting it out at a certain time. Creativity don't work like that.
I think that's a real misconception that a lot of what I call civilians or non-artistic people, I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have, in that you can just kind of turn creativity on or off.
That stuff makes no sense to me. Like, how do you tell someone that you only have a certain amount of time to put together something that should normally take a lot longer?
The idea that someone can force you to be creative, I think is silly. And I think that in a lot of ways it's counterproductive, because it's kind of like saying, okay, be funny right now. It's just like I've seen really well-known comedians who they're just like, I can't do that. You know, I gotta give me a minute to like warm up and get my flow.
I think businesses force creativity to the point where it doesn't even feel like you're an artist or you're doing anything creative. It's you cycling out what's been proven to work.
That the entities that serve the individuals, the businesses that are they're all about the one person at the very top. You know, those businesses, they squeeze creativity out of people, and they don't really allow for people to expand in their idea of self and their idea of what they ought to be doing. They're just being told what to do and taking commands.
Spitting on it, you know, giving it a good monkey shine, and then giving it to the world.
I know artists and musicians who have had to go through that, you know, where they say you have 5 hours, come out with a dope track.
I need that by today, by 12. And you might not be in the mood. You like, man, I ain't feeling it right now. You know, that's just like that. So that's a lot of pressure for artists.
That added pressure, all that's gonna do is hinder them from being creative. I think any artist will tell you that. Any musician, anyone that works with art will tell you that deadlines and trying to tell somebody that you have to have something done within a certain amount of time is not going to do anything but hinder them from doing something that they would otherwise be proud of. You know, they may get your project done, but it's not going to be to the best of their ability.
Each time you work on a piece, to me, I mean, I always have a point of reference. There's, you know, I'm not just slapping paint on a piece of wood. There's always a concept. And there's always an idea that leads into a concept, that leads into a composition, you know, and that's how it is. So everything is purposeful, you know. So that's pretty much how it works for me. That's my process, you know. And if I'm not motivated, if I don't have a concept or an idea, then I'm not painting.
Ultimately, the decision came down to these two options: freedom or security.
For a lot of artists, payment comes in because a corporation needs their work, whether that be, you know, a graphic designer for their website or an actor for their commercial.
You're put in a position where you have to do this painting, you have to make this film, you have to make this project. It has to be like this, it has to be blue, it has to be red.
I do believe that everyone always has a choice in their situations. Sometimes it's a choice between something terrible and something only a little terrible. You know, so I think that it's a tricky call to make. I do believe in free will, but on the other hand, as a college professor, I see students today, you know, leaving school, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in debt. And higher education is more expensive than it has ever been. And I think that it's very difficult because on the one hand, you have students, you have people who are trained professionals who are working at unpaid internships, you know, and it's very difficult because on the one hand, I do think you always have a choice, but in terms of being pragmatic, you also have to be able to pay your bills.
You know, artists aren't gun to head forced to work with businesses to make money or pitch some idea. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is capitalist America.
But I believe this is heaven sent stuff, and it's not about commercial success. I think that deviates from your true inspirations and passions and motivations. I've seen the cats burn out because they're constantly pushing something that has nothing to do with their own creative energy or spirit.
For most people, myself included, I think that you will have those years of taking those crummy jobs where you're just like, this is not what I thought my life was going to be. And they're awful, but in a lot of ways they're also kind of a rite of passage, you know. And I've seen some of my former students who have said that they're going to take this job outside of their field, save up some money for a couple of years, and they never make it back to the arts, you know. And then I've seen kids who've said, you know what, I'm moving to New York, I'm going to become a freelance illustrator, and I'm going to make that happen. And one of my former students right now, Sam Connolly, who is living in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, he's just this really determined kid, and I think that if you really want it badly enough, there is no force on earth that's going to deter you.
I believe you can do commercial work, but you have to balance it out with your own work.
I think that there are artists out there who can work in a commercial setting and retain their conscience, and I think that's pretty great, and I'm seeing more of that, you know, like the Honest Tea campaign is a really great example, and I think we're going to see more of that as people start to realize, like, okay, you know what, the way that things like commercial art, advertising, the way those arenas have been going, that's got to change.
I don't think that you need these big corporations unless you're trying to be close to as big as they are. If you don't care about that, if your only purpose is getting your message out, then you're not forced to do anything.
Eventually, the Diaz had had enough. They banded together during late hours to plan their escape. These plans to rebel were led by a deist named Zion, who claimed that he had received a message from the gods that their creative capabilities shouldn't be exclusive to one group of people. They had enough power to be independent.
I think this is one of the greatest times in history for artists to be independent. I think for me, in the last 5 years, I've witnessed more connection between artists of all different kinds, thanks to the fact that everybody's struggling all at once.
You know, it's great, it's more accessible to the public, it makes things easier for artists.
It's good that, I mean, just artists are so reachable along with internet, digital mediums. I mean, art is very approachable now from any angle. Anyone can hop in the game and anyone can exit at any time.
I could tell you most actors would really prefer to do like an independent film than a commercial.
They have the opportunity, like, let's say, for example, Bombay Sapphire. They do their art contests every year for artists to possibly show in Miami at Art Basel, which is the new artist, phenomenon type of art fair conference in the United States.
You can build up an audience and a following and promote your name better versus just sending in a CD that only one person will ever see. This way, a lot of people can see it once.
You know, and I think people are more interested in really authentic experiences instead of just like flashy stuff.
I think times is changing. You know, this is just my opinion. I think the way the art world has been dictated is going to change, definitely. As a matter of fact, it is changing.
Back in the day, you needed help from giant corporations. Now the giant corporations need you more than you need them. They need product to sell. They need people to market. But you don't need them if you know how to do it yourself. If you know how to use stuff like Twitter and Facebook, and you don't need them.
Creating a website for myself personally for my photography, I was talking to someone who I had just met and was mentioning my business as a photographer, and she was like, oh yeah, I Googled that. I thought I recognized that name. And I was like, oh, that's great that's popping up.
Look at someone like Macklemore. Look at someone like Mac Miller. They didn't need corporations. They proved themselves through their music and what they could do independently. They got millions of people to get behind them to where these corporations had no choice but to offer them distribution deals.
We can exist without galleries. They can't exist without us.
They already had what they had based on what they did themselves. They had the internet. They used the internet for what it's there for, to spread a message. Same thing with what Soulja Boy did back in the day. And of course, I'm not saying yay Soulja Boy, but what he did, I think, was a landmark, you know? Same with Lil B. These guys are telling you that you don't need a huge corporation. Lil B has one of the biggest fan bases I've ever seen. loyal fan bases.
Now, on the other hand, everybody who can work a digital camera or the camera on their iPhone thinks that they're as good as someone who's just spent 4 years studying photography.
Because anyone can get their foot in the door now, but the guys who really need this as a career, it becomes just non-happening because they're bringing in like young guys to do it with their little iPhones.
I know how to play the game Operation. Doesn't make me a doctor.
I think the independent artist is always going to have a little bit of a struggle, but I also think that the independent artist couldn't do anything else. And so the struggle's always worth it.
The DS all believed it was worth it and followed Zion's directions. They began to march out of the city, only to be stopped by the corporation's military at gunpoint. Instead of fighting back or running away, they stood in unison. Suddenly, a light beamed down from the sky and struck the group of Dias. A light formed a ball around them and carried them far away from the city. Supposedly, that was the day the Dias discovered the first part of the honor system: power.